Hello, hello. Hey guys, here with another episode of the Gedunk podcast with my co-host Bobby Jones. We've got a fun show for you tonight. A lot of stuff going on in the world in case you haven't been paying attention. And we've got some opinions. So we are ready to share. Bobby, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good, but you're right. It's like every day there's something else that's happening in the world where you're literally asking yourself how,
Yep.
why, what,
Yep.
what does that mean? So, we've tried to be more steady with stuff, but we got to start addressing some of these things because now it's affecting everyday lives. And so, let's get into it. So, as you may or may not know, we had an election here a couple of months ago, and we had an inauguration a couple of weeks ago, and President Trump and his administration are back for a second time. It's the only one of two presidents to do non-consecutive terms. This has been interesting because we have seen a flood of changes that really has been unprecedented in American history. If you work for the federal government right now, your future is very, very much in a fog state at best and probably terminal at worst, right? So some of us have family members that work for the federal government outside Department of Defense, stuff like that. I have a sister that works for the Environmental Protection Agency. Dan, you have a brother that works at DOS, or as
Department
we
of
call it.
State,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. And all of these people, we're talking thousands, millions almost, have been emailed different things about the policies that have changed since Donald Trump has assumed the presidency. Um, the biggest one that affects the workers themselves is this basically 8 month severance package deal, where basically they sent an email that talked about a fork in the road and how they want to rein in the government as far as size and spending. And you basically had until, let's see, you have until, I want to say, to tomorrow. Well, we're recording this on the February 5th. I think tomorrow that they have to make a decision whether to resign their position and take an 8 month severance package to go into the workforce, into the civilian workforce, leaving behind their government careers. Now, on the surface, that sounds great. And we're going to talk about why that's not exactly true here in a second. But most importantly, this is just one major salvo. We've seen federal government grants and spending frozen, then unfrozen. We've seen trade war tariffs be proposed, signed in, and then removed, with our two closest allies in Mexico and Canada. We have seen chaos upon chaos upon chaos, both internationally and domestically. What does all this mean for the United States of America? Um, I'll give my personal view here. The unpredictability of what we're dealing with now is possibly the most anti-American thing. Meaning, there's a reason the world's economic bodies use the American dollar as their standard currency because of the stability and the predictability. There is a reason that the United States has as many trade partners as it has, as many allies as it has, because of the predictability and the stability, both internal and external. What we have seen here in the first 2 weeks of the new Trump administration is the exact opposite of that. We've gone to Panama and said, give us the canal. We've gone to Greenland and said, told Denmark, give us your land. We have literally spent a lot of time destroying relationships we've had for going on a century. And that century was a result of the American century, where America really rose to become the leaders. So I know a lot of people want us to talk about this because you have reached out, and we're going to talk about it. But we're going to do it in a way where we talk about the legality and then what we believe is the major cause for a lot of this upheaval. Um, Dan, Dan, you got anything?
Yeah, man. So a couple of thoughts. Like when I think about, obviously, I was an anti-Trump. I still am an anti-Trump guy, right?
Yep.
But the guy won the election. Okay, so he's selling something that at least enough Americans are buying. So taken at face value, I understand the argument. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the argument that you want government to be small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want um, as many, as few regulations rather, for you want to start a business, right? Or you want to build a house on some land and the government says, hey, there's endangered ducks or fucking whatever, right, on that land and you can't build the house. I understand wanting to be like, no, I don't want a government that says I can't build my house there. I don't want a government that says this is how I have to run my business. I don't want a government that pays taxes, that I got to pay taxes to. I get that. What I really don't understand is some of the self-owning that we're doing right now, where we're cutting off things like USAID. And I'm telling you, like, this does not make sense to me on so many levels, right? Like, you can, but I mean, you and we are like pro-American, right? Like,
Very much
let's
so.
make America the best country in the world. Let's kick some fucking ass. And let me tell you something, guys. The cheapest, most economically efficient way to do that is, to show the flag and build some bridges. And I mean,
Soft
literally
power.
build bridges, right? I mean, China,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
everyone's obsessed with, who is a near peer adversary and is growing and is,
Mm-hmm.
potentially there could be a shooting war sometime in our lifetime. China has like roads and bridges and they build them all around the world. I mean, you go to some of these countries in Africa and you're like, it's a third world country, it's huts, it's things like that. And then you go over this nice bridge and you're like, how'd you guys build this bridge? And they're like, oh, the Chinese did it. I've
Yep.
been in multiple
Yep.
African
Same.
countries where China
Same.
does it, right?
Same.
And like they're eating our lunch. Like it is the most this is a huge self-own, man. It is so stupid. Like, don't be a fucking dummy. The cheapest and best way to make America like, powerful, big at the
Right.
table in every conversation
Right.
is to spend pennies on a bridge in some country like Chad, right?
I,
Anyway, that's my
no,
rant.
no, no. It's not a
Yeah.
rant. You're being accurate. So let's go back to that. Using Africa as an example. So definitely been to Africa. UN peacekeeper there for about a year in Liberia after their civil war. The only major entities outside the United Nations that was proactively rebuilding that country was China and USAID. Let me say that one more
Yeah.
time. USAID. I worked with them exclusively for the most part, getting these things that you talk about as soft power
Yep.
back, right? And so here's the thing. Liberia has the largest natural rubber plantation in the world
Yep.
in its country. FDR during World War II made a point to visit them
Yep.
to make sure we still had the rubber coming to win to defeat the Nazis and the Axis. Okay, that's how important strategically it is.
Yep.
USAID shutting down, we're pulling out of there. China has built infrastructure upon infrastructure, road after road there, going back now 20 years. Okay, where is the counter? See, the problem that I have with this whole argument about, oh yeah, America needs to take care of itself first, and then at the same time saying America's the greatest country in the world, you cannot be the greatest country in the world and not lead it. So either you're going to lead it or you're going to isolate yourself from it. You can't do
Exactly.
both. You
Right?
can't do both. And what
Exactly.
I don't understand how people do not see that. Well, I do. I understand how people don't see that, especially in the current administration when you look at their backgrounds, because the thought process is to make money, to generate money for a select group of people, right? If you look at the inauguration, because it was moved indoors, take a look who's all attending. People like me and you were not there. We couldn't afford to be there, right? And so when you talk about making America great again, that I think that's a bullshit slogan. I think it should be "Make America the Greatest Ever," which means you go out and you lead. You don't isolate. You don't boot people. You figure out the best way to bring people together. And for the longest time in our history, the American century in particular, that's what America did.
Yep.
And we're
And
undoing all of that.
you go around the world, man, and you talk to some of these other people, and it's not charity, guys.
No.
That's what someone like Elon Musk wants you to think that it's charity.
Oh, we're
It's
going to
not
get to
charity.
him.
You hit the nail on the head. It's soft power, right?
Yep.
You go into these countries, you hand out some soccer balls, you build a couple roads and bridges, and people have a positive perception of
Right.
America. I'll tell you. So I was in one of the deployments I did was in the country of Chad. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Chad is dirt poor, and this was back, in the 2000s, right? And we were there because it was adjacent to Darfur, and there were some Al Qaeda camps in Darfur, right?
Right.
So we have an interest there, and we're doing some stuff there. Chad is the only country that I personally have ever been to where, because it was a French colony. So like the French actually just left Chad, right?
Yep.
And they used it like their Fort Irwin. In France, they can't, drop bombs and practice
Nope.
tank maneuvers and stuff
Right.
like that. So they do that shit down in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so the French had colonized Africa starting in the 1900s, and they had taken over Chad. Basically, it was their colony, and so there's still a heavy French presence in Chad. And Chad was the only country that I've been to where you were safer as like a white dude being like, "I'm American.
Yep.
I'm not French. Don't get it twisted, man. I've got like we put American flags on our trucks." Because they were, the people they didn't like were the French, right?
Exactly.
And like they loved America. They wanted us to help them. They wanted us to help them fight Islamic rebels in their country. They wanted to like help us in Darfur and, do all these things. And we did real stuff down there, guys. I mean, we got, there was intel that came out of there that was directly relevant to the Tanzanian and Kenya embassy bombings. There was stuff that, and that's how like the world works, right? And so it's just so short-sighted to think that we're giving out charity. It's like it's not charity, man. It's like buying a girl a drink at a bar, right? Like you got to have an opening, man, right? You want something, right?
I agree completely, and I'll take it a step further. Anywhere I went in Africa, and when you're part of the United Nations, you have your country's flag on your shoulder, just like we do now.
Yeah.
Every time someone stopped me and took a picture with me, they wanted to make sure the American flag was showing. Even though I
Yeah.
literally looked like one of the 14 tribes that was in Liberia, it comes to find
Yeah.
out that I'm pretty
Yeah,
close
man.
to my ancestry. But they wanted the American flag shown. It was
Yeah.
like the seal of validation to a lot of people. America cares. That means we matter, right? And so what we're doing now is going the exact opposite. The other piece of all this happening this week that kind of relates to this is we talk about this DEI thing. The one thing I love about the Navy that I love so much is I got to travel the world, right? When you ask anybody in any country, what does an American look like? Because I've asked the question, they point at you, the person asking the question, because we have an entire spectrum of people that look different, this, that, and other, that people would still consider American. Because we are really the only nation with the reputation where, hey, we got every dang thing the world has to offer as far as backgrounds, and they still classify themselves as American, right? We came up with this concept in modern times of a national identity that trumped the origins where everybody came from. And so here we are in 2025, and we are going out of our way to redefine and limit that. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was back at Annapolis in admissions, this is during the time, this is what, 2005, around that time, stuff like that,
Yep.
where we started getting the reports in Afghanistan where our own people were getting fragged by interpreters. There had been
Yeah.
there had
Green
been
on
people
blue. Yeah.
yeah, there have been people who had infiltrated our interpreter corps, basically, that were from Afghanistan, and they were attacking American servicemen.
Yep.
And it was hard to detect. And Dan, you know this better than I do. When I was going on the road to recruit for the Naval Academy, I got to talk to some old grads, and they were like, why is this diversity thing such a big deal? And I pointed out something. I said, the highest population of Arab-speaking Americans is in Michigan, Dearborn,
Yeah.
that area.
Yep.
And I said, those kids who are super smart were raised as American, understand the culture overseas, speak the language fluently, understand the culture, but more importantly, they identify as American. Why then on God's green earth would we not recruit those type of kids? I go, you're talking about the only nation in the world where we can recruit people who identify themselves as American and have these various backgrounds. Instead, we'd rather pay people who we don't really know to be our interpreters and possibly kill our own servicemen. I go, it's a matter of national security. If you are the world leader and you have populations from all over the world, and then you don't use them, then you're complicit in your role as world leader. Period.
Yeah.
When I explained it like that, and these guys were like class of 58, 59, 60, it clicked. And they were like, well, why are we doing a better job recruiting them? Because when I put it in the frame of national security and what this is all about, and being, like you said, downrange,
Yeah.
everything changed because it became, forget the emotions and this, that, and the other. All of a sudden, it's like the realism of the mission and how hard it is to do. And here we are in 2025. We've forgotten those lessons. We've forgotten those lessons. And we're having these stupid discussions in culture wars. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we still have the same threats that are more robust than even when we were doing this 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. It's like, you can have, this was I'm going to try to paraphrase this. Something said to me by this Master Chief one time in the Navy who was like, you can have, he was talking about a specific SEAL team.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, look, you can have the best command you can have, or you can have the command you want. And these guys have the command they want, but it's not the best command they could have. And
wow,
that's kind of the moment we're in nationally, in my opinion.
I
Right?
agree.
Like, I want an American that cherry picks talent from around the world, right? Like, yeah, like, oh, there's some kid in, I don't know, Indonesia who like won the math contest.
Right.
Great. Bring him over here. Let's get him a
Right.
job at Apple, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it's really short-sighted to think that not leaning into the fact that people want to come here and want to be American, like,
It's
I don't
insane.
see the downside, man. And it's from a national security perspective, it's just straight up stupid. It's just straight up fucking stupid to not have people who look like the people you're trying to spy on, who can speak the same language as the people you're trying to spy on, right? Like, it probably would be helpful to have some people who are native Russian speakers working for the CIA in the Russia department, right? Like, that is just a fact that that's common sense, right? And
Right.
the truth is, we have intelligence and security interests everywhere in the world, from
Yes.
Mexico and Canada to North Korea, right? So we need all of that. I want us to be like the behemoth on the block
Yep.
that, the Jason Kelsey, right? Like, you got to get out of his way when he's coming
Yes.
through. And that's not a view that is shared by people like Elon Musk, right? So, I mean, Elon, right?
Yeah, let's talk
Elon,
about this guy.
let's talk about Elon for a second. Like, first of all, who the fuck is Elon? Right? Like, okay, he's the world's richest man. What does he know about government? I mean, Bobby, take it away, because this guy makes no
So-
sense. I want to hear your thoughts.
So let me. I'm gonna be very blunt and direct with this guy. Elon Musk is the guy that will sit there and tell you how much of a genius he is. And not only was he born on third base, he was practically stealing home before the game started and wants to talk about he's a home run hitter.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is this man has stolen so much. He first of all, what's very interesting to me is we're having this whole visa conversation right now. There have been story after story after story, credited sources about how he got to the United States from South Africa. Okay. His South African roots are very much born in mineral rights, exploitation, and the apartheid. Make no mistake, he believes in that system of government. He's been quoted. You can Google it, YouTube it. He's talked about it. Right.
Wait, so he thinks that, so does Elon like literally think South Africa should still have apartheid?
Yes. Yes.
What's
Because
okay? Explain apartheid for anyone who might not understand.
right. So an apartheid, basically the simplest way to put it is when you have minority rule over a majority of people. So once upon a time, the United Kingdom, aka Great Britain, aka England, whatever various you want to talk about, the sun never set on it. They had an empire that literally spanned the entire globe, right? South Africa was one of its crown jewels that they fought a war, the Boers and all this other kind of stuff between them and another European power. We can talk about that later. Bottom line is they won, they established South Africa, and they established an apartheid system where the minority white population had complete rule over the overwhelmingly majority population of Africans and various tribes that made the country. They codified everything starting in the late 1800s, really, all the way through the first part of the 20th century by passing laws that literally took land from black people. It took rights, all this kind of stuff, and gave it to white folks. Well, that's where someone like Nelson Mandela came into play. He was a freedom fighter. He was considered an extremist by the local South African government, and that's when he went to Robben Island and jail for 20 some odd years, almost 30 years, and then he was released. And
Long walk to freedom, right?
Yes, the long walk to freedom, and then brought the country together when he was released in the 90s and became president. Now, that being said, Elon was raised in an apartheid system and saw it go away. His family, I want to say, owns mineral rights or something like that, which gave them a very, very rich lifestyle to begin with. And so when Elon says he took a small loan, same thing that Donald Trump said that he got from his dad and became this multi-billionaire. Those weren't small loans. Trump got over $400 million from his dad over the course of his life, and Elon into multi-millions nice. Too. Yeah, small loan. Right. Life-changing money. However, Elon, back in the beginning of the tech boom, so when I say the beginning, back in the 90s, right? Yep. Came to this country. I'm trying to think that it was at Stanford, one of the schools he failed out of, but landed and got with the guys that started PayPal, leveraged that. And then there was a company called Tesla that he found out about, became a major investor. Mind you, was not a founder. Mind you, was not the engineering mind behind it. Mind you, came in and basically did a hostile takeover eventually. So much so that in the takeover, he had it dictated that he would be considered a founder, the founder of Tesla. The original guys that did it, long since gone because they were forced out, right? And then, of course, he leveraged that into SpaceX. So even back in the 90s, the companies that he wanted to highlight, that he gave them the title of X, right? Which is why when he bought Twitter, he changed the name to X, trying to make it a more profitable brand, a recognizable brand. Throughout all of this, he had the reputation of finding people who were extremely talented and gifted, super smart, and exploiting them. Paying them below wages, and developing a cadre of loyalists around them. Again, this sounds familiar. So he goes around the world with SpaceX and Tesla, and he got government subsidies in the billions over the last 20 years. With a B, billions. And now is considered the richest person in the world. If you took away his subsidies, if you took away how governments have covered up for his failures, he would not be considered close to the richest man in the world. But because he is now with a guy in Donald John Trump who respects money more than any other metric, as far as success, it's like two peas in a pod, to the point where the difference between the first Trump administration and this one is simply Elon Musk. If you want to know why the federal workers are getting these emails about a fork in the road and having to resign in 8 months, he did the exact same thing when he came to Twitter, right? If you want to know why there's this Department of Government Efficiency that he just started out, same exact thing he did when he took over Tesla. He's rerunning the playbook. Here's the difference. Government is not business. Let me say that again real slowly for people who are listening. Government is not business. Its primary function is not to make money. It never has been and it never will be.
So Elon, right? Mm-hmm. So, here's the thing, man. I understand there are parts of the government that are inefficient that could be improved upon. And you see this when, I don't know, you want a new passport and it takes 6 months and you're like, why is this taking 6 months, right? Like, you do your taxes. There's countless examples. health insurance, right? If you've got Medicaid or something like that, and Medicare, and you're trying to get your claims, like it's inefficient, right?
Yes.
And I understand the impulse to want it to be more efficient, but Musk is just doing dumb shit, man. Like,
Well, he doesn't care about the function of government. He doesn't care why an organization exists,
yeah,
right? So, for example, when you go in and you say, I want to destroy the Department of Education, we're going to kick it back to the States. Number one, understand what DOE's job is. Most kids that go to college get a loan from the government, FAFSA loans. No distributor for that if Department of Education goes away, because they're the ones that do it.
mhm,
Most importantly, though, if you have a kid with special needs, if you have a kid that has an individual education program, IEP, if
yeah,
you have any of that, that is directly funded and regulated by the Department of Education. See, they want to focus on, well, they look at curriculum, blah, blah, blah. Yes, they do all of that too, but you have so many kids now, especially post-COVID, that are on
yeah,
IEPs and stuff like that. And the state governments, which is the famous line that they like to say, we're going to kick it back to the states because we don't want to have any real responsibility, but we want all the authority. They're not set up to deal with that. None of them are. So when
yeah,
you look at a state like Oklahoma that is saying, hey, we want to destroy everything, they're 49th in education. Okay? They have a ton of kids
yeah.
that are IEP, special needs, blah, blah, blah. They are not set up, and I mean not set up at all, to deal with those issues if you destroy that, because it's a function. It is why you pay taxes. We pay taxes to provide things for the American people that an individual or a business cannot provide. That's national security, that's infrastructure, that is access to programs that help improve the quality of life for everybody. And so
Yeah.
when you go and you gut these things, right, there are ripple effects, and no one seems to care until it's directly them being affected.
Hey, man, I'll give you a real life example, that I see every day. So, Vermont used to, we used to have a state, like a state mental institution for
Yep.
folks who, just needed to be hospitalized, basically. And it went away maybe 10 years ago. And now everybody just comes to the emergency department. And,
Bingo.
you know,
And how does that help you as far as triage and
Oh
being
God,
around?
it's slow. I worked overnight the other night. We had 118 patients in the department at one time. Absolutely, this is a 50 bed emergency department. It's insane. We had 50 plus people in the waiting room for
I
hours, like
guarantee
waiting for
you,
7 hours.
people listening to this right now can identify someone in their family has gone through exactly that.
Yeah,
Medicaid is part of this whole shutdown of federal funding that Elon Musk, let me make sure I'm very clear,
it
is
is Elon.
advocating for. Advocating for. USAID going away? That is all him. So the richest man in the world is trying to defund the poorest people on the planet.
And
Let that
not
marinate.
not only that, man, he's like, it just came out today. It just dropped today that the CIA is doing the same thing, right? CIA sending these 8 month early retirement kind of package things,
Hmm.
right? Like, really? Like you want
Yes.
this? You want to defund the CIA,
Yes.
and you're worried about China and Russia, right?
Look,
It's
Missile
nuts.
Defense Agency. I worked there, active duty. Missile Defense Agency, ladies and gentlemen, primary job is to stop long range missiles from hitting the United States.
Yep.
And they got offered that. The CIA, MDA, all of these organizations, this is not someone that we can hire off the streets like they're opening a new Chick-fil-A in a month and you can sign up for this. Okay?
Hey, man, we
You
can
have to
franchise
learn
missile
this stuff.
defense. Let's think about this, Bobby. Well, franchise missile. This is our $1 million idea, man. So we start, we need like a starter package. We can have people just set up at like an Iron Dome type thing in their
Yep.
backyard,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
starter kit. You pay in maybe 10 grand. We'll kick it back to the private sector. It'll be
I
great.
mean, why not?
Yeah.
Because as someone who did the whole missile defense thing around the world, I'm sure everybody will agree on the targets that need to be protected most. I'm sure everybody will
Bobby,
understand how to
that's my new
utilize
side
those
hustle,
groups.
man. Missile defense is my new side hustle.
Dude,
Love it. I'm gonna make so much money.
I mean, why not? Because that's how cavalier we are. Going back to what I said, government does for the people what the people in the private sector cannot do for itself.
Yes.
That is its function. It is not to make money. Can it be ran more efficiently? Of course it can.
Sure.
Hell, the most profitable businesses can be ran more efficiently. But understand this. You should not be dealing with over 100 people in an emergency room because people don't have primary health care. They don't have Medicaid to pay for it. And now you are their doctor, period, instead of real emergencies. And you're a damn trauma surgeon.
It's interesting, man, because people don't know this. I talk to, we have medical students, residents. I always make sure that they know what EMTALA is. And if you don't know what EMTALA is, it's the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. It's 1986. So before EMTALA, you go to an emergency room and they're checking your insurance at the door. And there were these horror stories, actually out in on the West Coast. There were a couple horror stories of like, a dude with a knife sticking out of his head walks into an ER, gets turned away because he doesn't have insurance, dies, and so Congress passed EMTALA. The point of EMTALA is we don't turn people away because they can't pay. It's a law. So some of this stuff, they're trying to do, I can see it butting heads against existing real laws.
Yes.
If you have, if you're Elon Musk and you roll into the federal government and you're like, hey, we're cutting the Department of Education, which does IEPs for autistic kids, and all of a sudden they can't stay in school because they can't, stay in a regular classroom or the like, and now they're at home, and then they end up in the emergency department. I mean, there's a lot of downstream ramifications of all of this stuff.
Yep.
And it's just more efficient to meet these problems head on instead of kicking the can down the road. It's the same as the Chinese. The Chinese understand this. They're building the bridges in third world countries. And if you just let people fend for themselves, we're going to be fucked because the problem doesn't go away. It's just kicking the can down the road a little bit.
I not only do I agree, it's always been said, I mean, heck, while we were in the Navy, preventative maintenance is way, way more effective and cheaper than trying to fix something once it breaks.
Yep.
Using China as an example, if World War III breaks out tomorrow, China has a much better relationship with the African continent, which is the largest place for natural resources to win such a war.
Sure.
Than the United States does, than Europe does. And they did that by design. They took the feeling and the emotion of a continent that had been exploited, used, abused, and then ignored by the West and said, I'm your Huckleberry.
Yeah.
We'll build your ports. We'll build your infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. And they have a much friendlier relationship than we do, right? Especially when you have a commander-in-chief that called them shithole countries the first time he was in office. Don't think that did not go over well with these people.
And bringing Elon in.
You're leading right into it.
He's
of all the people from that continent that he could be like, I want you to sleep in the Lincoln bedroom and help us formulate policy. Now that leads to this. The legality of what is happening here. The Democratic Party is finally saying they're going to start bringing lawsuits. We need to start explaining to the American people how government works as designed by the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah,
okay? Man. People need to understand that Elon Musk was never elected. He was never appointed, so he had a Senate confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
He should not have the authority that he is exercising. First of all, let's go back. You cannot create nor destroy a federal department without Congress writing it into law.
Yep. Congress has the power of the purse. It's in
the power of the purse. What does that mean, people? That means if it costs money in the United States of America at the federal level, the United States Congress has to approve it. Period. That's budgets, like we have to deal with every year. That's the creation and destruction of departments. Anything that costs money. So when this Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, was announced, my first question is, where's the congressional bill approving it?
Yeah.
There isn't one.
Right.
So Doge is now becoming insidious and going into already existing organizations, Office of Personal Management, OMB, Office of Management and Budget, and they're going in and using that back door to try to implement these policies. But Doge is not a thing. And Elon Musk being in charge of Doge is not a thing. These 8-month retirement packages are not a thing, primarily because of number one reason. Congress has not appropriated funds to do any of that. There's no budget. There's no budget for it. As a matter of fact, we're on a continuation of the previous year's budget until mid-March. So we know there's no money for this. This is supposed to take place in August. So they're having people submit resignations, and then they're going to do what happened at Twitter, where we accept your resignation, but stockholders don't want to pay for your severance, so you're not going to get paid. But we'll keep the resignation.
Fine, Bobby. I don't know why you're freaking out, man. It's not like there's a bunch of airplane crashes or anything like that. You know, we got,
Dan, you're hitting on something that's visible. We see the airline crashes, right?
Yeah.
But what we're not seeing is USAID pulling out of some country that no one's ever heard of that could be susceptible to terrorist influences. What we don't see is the CIA agent who's been working for years on something, walking out the door, and the subject matter expertise goes with him or her. What we're not seeing is people who have dedicated their lives at personal cost, because if they did it in the private sector, they'd be a hell of a lot richer, right? They're doing it because they gave a damn and care about this country, walking out the door. And once it walks out the door, we can't get it back.
Yeah.
We can't get it back.
You can't. And, you know, the USAID thing too, if you haven't spent time overseas, an embassy is, you know, pick a country, right? And the U.S. Embassy, there's a lot of faces there, and there's a lot of people who collect intel. There's different ways in which people collect intel. It's not just the CIA. But I will tell you that, people who work for USAID, people who work for, the Peace Corps, whatever it is, these people are not intel collectors, right? They're not on the government payroll. But if you work for the CIA, you talk to those people. Hey, what are you guys seeing? You know, have the Mujahideen come by your clinic lately? Like, what? I mean, these are questions. That is how we collect intel. That human picture, the human intelligence, right? Like talking to people that occurs daily, hourly around the world by people who work for the Department of State, people who work for the CIA. It incorporates these aid groups that go out. We're going to be just in the dark, man. We're going to be like in the dark, and then some aid worker is going to get kidnapped. You know, some American Peace Corps worker is going to get kidnapped, and we're going to be in the dark, right? As opposed to, oh yeah, the CIA knows the bad guys in this area. I mean, this is how this stuff works, and it's not just Africa. This stuff happens in South America. It happens in Asia. It happens in the Philippines. You know, it's everywhere. It's global. You're constantly, as a nation, feeding intelligence from all your little tentacles out in the world. And we're self-goaling by being like, we're gonna cut off our own tentacles, man, because it's woke.
It's funny because going back to an earlier point that I was making, we want to be seen as the world leader, but it's like we don't want to pay the cost necessary to be the world's leader.
Yep.
Right. And so if I have a 17-year CIA veteran, right, that has poured into, I don't know, let's just say Southeast Asia, right? And all of a sudden he gets this email. Okay. And he or she is like, what do I do? What do I do? And more importantly, who do I turn over all this information to? Who's going to be a good steward of the work that we've been doing? Because here's my great fear, especially when you talk about CIA, FBI, any of these organizations that's primary goal is to protect America, its citizens, and its interest.
Yep.
What happens when someone steps away? That is the missing link, going back to the Swiss cheese model we're talking about, and you have another 9/11. Because the reason we put all this stuff into place was after 9/11, we were like, oh my God, our intelligence community doesn't talk.
Yep.
right? And now here we are again, ripping that apart because we believe, and let me, we believe that America and its government is a business.
Yep.
That is the thought. And we want to cut cost because we want certain people to have more lucrative opportunities through tax breaks, blah, blah, blah. This is not how this works. And when you go, and this is my biggest pet peeve, when you go and you beat up, especially on NATO countries that deployed with us, that shed blood with us, and died with us the last 25 years, the audacity of us to go to these countries and be like, hey, we don't think you do enough. Pay this, pay that, pay this, pay that. Go to the damn cemeteries in their countries. I heard from various people that memorials like at the CIA wall, the State Department wall, where people who have died and working for the State Department has been removed. It's like the sacrifices, which the emotional currency that is paid America in full from our allies is being ignored because we want to make money. Make no mistake, Article 5 of NATO's charter, which means if one nation's attacked, all are attacked and we come together and fight for that nation, has only been activated one time, and that was by the United States of America after September 11th. Everybody else has never activated it. Only we have, and we're sitting there acting like we're so high and mighty with this. Makes no sense.
From firsthand experience, maybe I'll tell this story someday, but on the pod, but I've had my life probably saved by a NATO ally directly. Like,
I believe
we were lost. We were on E&E, escape and evasion. Like, the mission went to shit. Something happened that we weren't expecting. And another NATO country scrambled jets to come find us and locate us and give us air support. And
I can tell you my time, especially deployed to the Western Pacific, there were countries that are NATO affiliated or affiliated like NATO to us that literally saved and salvaged at least 2 different missions that I was involved with.
Yep.
Thank God I wasn't escaping or anything and shit didn't go shit. But it would not have been completed, nowhere near successful without their intervention. And they did so happily without asking. You know what I'm saying? Right after 9/11, these guys were like, what do you need from us? And we're not even one generation away from that. And we're over here treating them like they are some vagrant squatters in an apartment they haven't paid for.
It's just stupid, man. When I was in Chad, this is my example, right? Of this, this deployment was when I had kind of the most interaction with the embassy world, with other countries. And at one point, this was not really why we were there, but there was a rebel invasion, and the rebels sort of almost made it to the capital. They were kind of the outskirts of the capital. And we were talking about, not we, I was a low-level SEAL at the time, but like the powers that be were talking about, do we need to do a NEO, a non-combatant evacuation operation, and get all the Americans out of here? And, there are people up in Germany planning, all right, we're going to send down, this Marine company and, do all these things to get Americans out and keep Americans safe. And I went to a meeting with the French general who was kind of running all the French troops in the country. Remember, this is the French colony, and there's a shitload of French troops down there. And they're sort of like, well, he was like, we sort of consider it our responsibility to like get all the Westerners out. If this wasn't a written thing, they were just like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, this is our place. We know if the rebels are not going to take the capital, we're not going to let them. We're going to make sure that they don't attack the U.S. embassy. We're going to make sure they don't attack the British embassy. We're going to make sure they don't attack the French. These things happen. We depend on allies. It is not enough to just say like we're going to. What you would have to do instead is, instead of the French having like an armored division in there, training and using the nation of Chad as their Fort Irwin, you would have to have, you'd have to have Marine recon, you'd have to have a company of Marines or a battalion of Marines, or the 82nd Airborne would have to come in, or whatever. Right. It's just like, This is just working. It's working harder, not smarter, really, and it's just fucking stupid.
I'll leave it at this. America is a superpower because of one main thing. We're the military superpower in the world because our military arm can reach any point on this planet.
Yep.
And we're the only country that can do that right now. China's getting closer, but we are. And the reason we are able to do that is because we are aligned militarily with our allies, we're aligned economically with our allies, and even depending on where you are in the world, socially with our allies, right? Allies being different than, acquaintances or partners, is allies, right? And what we're doing is we're pissing away those major aspects that allow us to be a superpower. When you go out of your way to call out allies that landed on the beaches of Normandy with you, Canada, or literally was there at the birth of your country, France, these type of things that over 250 years were established, and you're undoing them in 2 weeks, there are going to be repercussions. There are going to be repercussions, and it's going to make everything less stable for us, our allies, and the world.
And you know what, Bobby? I'm just gonna say this about the Canadians.
Yeah.
Cansoft, they're fucking good, dude.
I know.
Don't fuck with the Canadians,
Preach.
man. The Canadians can kick some serious ass. Their special forces are really good. I've seen those guys work. They know what the fuck they're doing.
Yep.
They were with us in Afghanistan that whole time. It's
Look, my time in the Navy showed me that the Canadians and the Australians are possibly the most underrated militaries in the world.
Yeah.
They are, they are self-sufficient. They're like, we will figure it out and we'll roll with it. And the average American doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And you would think that the Secretary of Defense would know this, and you would think that the President of the United States, who's the subject matter expert on everything, let him tell it. No one knows more than him about whatever, would be able to say this. This is why I have issues with what's happening, is because it's not about him. It's not even about the people he's appointing. It's about the American people that they're supposed to be serving, and it's putting us at undue risk. Like you said, it's a self-goal. It's a self-own that we're doing in the first 2 weeks, and it's going to take months if we start now to unravel this damage.
We bought a lemon. This is a lemon, man. We bought a lemon. The American people bought a lemon in this administration. We are gonna have serious problems with Elon, and and Trump's too. He's just like, he's kind of old. He's checked out. He likes to, have the pretty women come by and do his little YMCA dance or whatever. And like, the dude is not in charge. Elon's in charge.
I agree. And it's so funny. I have to agree with Steve Bannon for the first time in my life. Steve Bannon's like, no, that guy should not be there. He went off, and I was like, is this Steve Bannon? But we both graduated from the Naval War College. He understands strategically what Elon is doing to undermine America's place in the world. He sees it. And people who are actually paying attention, you have conservatives and liberals who are seeing this happening, and they're like, how? Because the legality is not there, but most importantly, culturally, the damage we're doing both internally and externally to the rest of the world is devastating. But
man. On that note, Elon Musk sucks. He's also probably a terrible athlete. What do you think his vertical is, Bobby? I think his vertical is less than a foot.
I don't think the man could, after seeing him jump, I don't think he could jump over a credit card line flat in a ditch.
He jumped on stage with Trump.
I saw that. And gravity was whooping his ass.
But I think that was his max. I think that was his max vertical. He was kind of, did not, doughy lower half, which brings us to our next topic that I want to talk about. Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, man. Yeah. Who got the better deal? What are your thoughts?
So let me set the stage for people who have no idea about sports at the NBA. In the National Basketball Association, Luka Doncic, who's Slovenian, wonder kid, since he came to the league at 19, was like European League MVP at 12, some ridiculous number like that. Anyway, got his team to the NBA Finals, played for the championship, and lost to the Boston Celtics last year. Luka is a generational talent. Luka is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And Luka is directly tied with my hometown team, the Atlanta Hawks, because we had the rights to Luka on draft night and we traded it for Trae Young.
Oh, I forgot about that, man.
Yeah, and Trae
Young's done better than people thought.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Trae's been an all-star. He's been snubbed this year. But Luka's had a heck of a lot more help than Trae has had. Here's the deal. Luka is what, 25, 26?
Yeah.
26. And the Dallas Mavericks traded him, a franchise player, to the Los Angeles Lakers, where he's now partnered up with LeBron James. And they sent Anthony Davis, who is another first ballot Hall of Famer, but past his prime, this and another, to Dallas to play with Kyrie Irving. The rumor is that Luka, well, that this is not a rumor. He's a prima donna because he's been told he's the greatest thing since sliced bread since he was like 5 playing basketball.
Well, but he is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, no.
The dude averaged 34 points a game last year, man. He almost averaged a triple-double.
You know what? He almost averaged a double-double when it comes to hamburgers at a drive-thru. This is the issue with him. He, because of his immense skill set, he has not been the most disciplined in keeping his body in shape. His body breaks down. He gets injured a lot, and it's happened a lot the last couple of years because he doesn't keep his body in shape. And he was coming up on basically a $300 million contract.
How many games did he miss? How many games has he missed?
I think he's played only 22 games this year, or missed 22, something like that.
How many games has Luka missed? All right.
So if you Google that, you'll see us a lot for a superstar. Now, compare this to when we were growing up and Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's like, look, I don't miss games. I play every night, back to back, whatever. The mentality of the superstar has changed. How many games has he missed?
Luka's played in 22 of 49 games this season.
Because he's fat and out of shape. Period.
Yeah, but
so now let me ask you a question. No, wait a minute. If you are an owner of a sports franchise, so let's say you're the Boston Celtics owner, right? Jason Tatum signed, a nice extension, whatever. If you had a chance to sign a Luka Doncic for $300 million, knowing the last 2-3 years he's been injured because he's basically out of shape, his knees can't take it, he's not athletic. He looks like someone, if you weren't careful, that you saw playing at the Y. Right. He's deceptively athletic, but he don't look the part. And you see his body starting to break down. Would you give him $300 million?
I don't know. We give Jaylen Brown $300 million.
But y'all won a championship too.
Jalen's awesome.
And Jalen is from here in the Metro Atlanta area. He's always been awesome. Super smart, went to Cal. He's a total package you want in an athlete or a human being. If the Hawks could trade for him right now, I'd do it.
Hey, man, Jalen is great. Okay, so here's the thing about Luka. If you bring Luka, so I think this trade makes so much sense for the Lakers.
Of course,
right? You get rid of Anthony Davis, who, like you said, is on the back part of his career. I don't think Anthony Davis is like a first team and first all NBA.
Not anymore.
Davis has been very good, but remember when Davis was going to LA and he was meeting with LeBron, people were like, oh, this is going to be, they're going to win 5 championships, and none of that has happened. I think this is a good trade for LA. I mean, you got LA's, and as a Celtics guy, it pains me to say this, but I mean, you've got a great young coach that people want to play for in JJ, right? You've got LeBron, who's like, the biggest problem the Lakers have right now is this Bronny James bullshit, who's like clearly a Nepo baby. But I like bringing Luka in there. If you sign Luka, it's like what the Dodgers are doing. You bring in these guys like Shohei and
we will talk about the Dodgers before
Dodgers, man. Baseball's coming up. But I like this trade. I wonder if there's a way for Luka. Maybe he can get like gastric bypass or something, man.
Well, I think part of what they're hoping is him being with the LeBron.
Yeah.
Who has taken care of his body so phenomenally over 20 plus years.
The standard for off-season workouts, eating right, staying healthy.
Exposing him to LeBron and that culture
ultimate
will elongate his career. Yeah. Yep. And to be honest with you, I think it will work. I think that's what will happen. I think he's going to be around LeBron on a daily basis.
Yep.
LeBron's like, put that down. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. Leadership by example. Because one thing about Luka and these young stars like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown had to figure out, or in my town, Trae Young, they were drafted so young. They only played like 1 year of college and never had like a veteran show them how to be a professional.
Sure.
The difference between like Luka Doncic and Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, one of the greatest players of all time, top 50. He was the round mound of rebound at Auburn. He was like 300 pounds, 6'5". And the 76ers drafted him after winning an NBA championship. On that team, you had Dr. J, Julius Erving, and Moses Malone, one of the top 5 greatest centers of all time. He gets there, and the first thing Moses and Dr. J tell him is like, you're fat, and you're going to be a professional. He didn't even have a suit. They had to go take him to get a suit, and they told him, this is what you must do to be a professional. And he shedded the weight and became an absolute animal. But he had 2 Hall of Famers, actually more than 2. He had Sam Jones, all these guys on that 76ers team that showed him what it was like to be a professional. Luka never got that. This goes back to what we kind of been talking about here in our episodes about the culture, right? Especially amongst young men. You got to have people around young men, 19 from Slovenia, or in Trae Young's case, 19 from Oklahoma, to say, this is how you become a professional. This is how you become the best at what you do. And therefore, they grow with your culture. What happened in Dallas was his talent was so bright, they let him do whatever he wanted to. Gave him the green light, both on the court and off the court. And he never became disciplined. He's going to become disciplined now because LeBron ain't going to play that. He ain't playing none of that shit. I can tell you that right now.
Bobby, I agree with your analysis. You're forgetting one thing. There's one common thread through all of this, which is that Kyrie Irving destroys everything that he touches.
You really? So you think Kyrie? Oh, that's a good point.
Kyrie,
well, I was about to say y'all are bitter for what he did in Boston.
Well,
come on.
Yes. And then Kyrie's on the Nets, right? Like,
yes.
KD doesn't want to play with him, right? Nobody, Harden doesn't want to play. Nobody wants to play with Kyrie. He comes to Boston. He poisons that locker room. He goes to Dallas and, lo and
behold, to the
finals. There's a bunch of talent on the team and they underachieve, right? I mean, I guess they didn't underachieve, but, they went to the finals.
They went to the finals, but didn't win.
Apart. So Kyrie's the guy who is not showing Luka how to be a professional, right?
I find it interesting.
Plus, he went to Duke, man.
Well, yeah, that for like 9 months. No, I think it's interesting that we're giving Luka the benefit of a doubt. But think about it like this: you must really want to be rid of somebody after he is the franchise player, All NBA multiple times, first team All NBA, gets you to the finals, and the general manager and the ownership, no longer Mark Cuban, by the way, say he's got to go. Yep. He's got to go. So how bad is the locker room? How bad is the chemistry if they're trading somebody of that caliber?
Guys are just flipping on quarter pounder wrappers.
Dude. I mean, think about it. You get to the NBA, you have personal trainers, right? Yeah. Personal trainers that put together personal workouts, diets, and all of that for you. There is no excuse. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Jokic up in Denver. He has sort of a dad bod.
He's a big boy.
But he's a lean big boy. He's not like just blah, blah, blah. There are times you look at Luka and you're like, did he sneak in from the rec league? And is he, I mean, come on.
What are your thoughts on Zion? Give me 30 seconds to Zion.
Zion. So Zion Williamson, for those who don't know, another phenomenal talent, went to Duke.
Freak.
Absolute athletic
270 with a 48-inch vertical leap.
Unbelievable.
Insane.
In my personal opinion, should have been a tight end in the NFL. Yeah. He is undisciplined as hell, too.
Yeah.
Completely undisciplined. Again, this man, not only his diet and not only his injuries because of his lack of being in shape, his off-the-field selections, like the women he dates and stuff like that are in certain industries, he is completely undisciplined, and it shows on what he's able to produce on the court, to the point where the Pelicans are like, we don't want him, pretty much. They're kind of stuck with him because no one else wants him. Right? And so you got to ask yourself.
Lakers.
Like, look, I'll tell you like this. You see people in the league like a Jalen Brunson who was a champion in Villanova.
Yeah, man.
Dallas didn't want him, goes to New York and thrives because he grinds. He works hard. There's something to be said for the culture of work and the culture of being dedicated. And when you are talking about being the best in the world, I don't care if we're talking about playing the game of tiddlywinks. If you're trying to be the best, you have to have a level of commitment that is better than anybody else, no matter what your natural talent is.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing with Luka, what we're seeing with Zion, you have a bunch of athletes in this generation that are not wired that way. They're like, I'm good enough as is, and I'm making money. I've reached my goal. They're not like Jordan, Barkley, Ewing, heck, Dominique in Atlanta. All these guys were like, I will rip your throat off to be the best. Bird, my God, Bird was the most stone cold assassin this league has ever seen.
Bird was, Bird was hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Right? But I think some of that had to do with, they just, I feel like they just didn't know enough about strength.
They didn't. And Bird too would be the type, he'd play injured.
Yeah.
And it made it worse. He would power through. He's like, I got to play. If he saw the Lakers or the Sixers or someone on that schedule, he's playing, which is a different animal and a different problem than the current generation of athletes, where if they have a hangnail, they ain't going to play.
They also used to like fight all the time, like Bill Laimbeer and like a bunch of assholes.
That was ultimate competition level.
Totally.
And I'll be honest with you right now, when I look at like women's basketball and stuff like that, they're more competitive in many respects than the NBA is now, because it's like they're where we were 20 years ago with the NBA. They're there now.
I think the best sports in America is the mid-major conference tournaments trying to get into the NCAA.
That one bid.
Yeah.
Vermont, y'all know all about that. That one bid.
It's so good. I mean, Vermont sucks this year, but I don't know. We could have a run in the tournament, but you always see like Wisconsin, Green Bay, make a run, like all these small market teams. Those guys just diving after every loose ball. That's some of the best. That's some of the most fun.
The most desperate,
yeah,
the most intense basketball or any sports competition in the world is that team that gets one shot. Just one shot. Like in the UK, they have the FA Cup where every team on that island is eligible to win the thing. Yep. And you see the big time premier teams, they'll send their B teams. Meanwhile, these lower leagues are sending the best they got. And they're fighting tooth and nail. It ratchets it up things. It's the ultimate form of competition, which is why Luka is infuriating to me, because mentally, I think he wants to be the best. But he has not connected the dots on what it takes to be the world's best.
I think
he's never had to.
I think Luka is. I think Kyrie is just the Elon Musk of the Dallas Mavericks. Bobby, let's end it there, man. That was fun, man. We had some good stuff. We'll talk more, and next week. I'm gonna give you guys an update on the Zizian case, which we talked about last week.
Yes.
It gets weirder. The founder faked his death, and no one can find him. So anyway,
what? We definitely got to talk about that.
All right, Bobby, that was great, man. Hang in there, bro. We'll talk soon.
Like and subscribe. Bye, y'all.
All right. Bye, guys.